Sweden, Sweden, Sweden. Us man are down in the DM. Sweden, 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 Sweden. Us man are down in the DM. Sweden, 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 Sweden. Us man are down in the DM. Sweden, 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 Sweden. Us man are down in the DM.
Hi everyone! In this video, my team and I will be discussing the profile we have created for our country of choice, Sweden. I'm Gabby, and I'll be starting off the video, then I'll pass the first question to Alex. Nem and Izzy will take on the economic and human development of Sweden respectively. I'll be back to explain the culture in Sweden, and Milos will conclude the video for us. So before we dive into the questions, here are some facts to note about Sweden. Sweden is a country located in the north of Europe and has a population of 9.95 million. It has a GDP of $538 billion with its capital city being Stockholm, and is one of the member states in the European Union. Now let's get into the questions.
Globalization is the process by which businesses or other organizations develop international influence or start operating on an international scale. The first area that Sweden has benefited from globalization in is deregulation and free trade. Between 1985 and 1990, Sweden saw themselves undergoing major changes in the area of deregulation, where restrictions and control over the exchange market were removed, and they embarked on their journey toward globalization. Sweden saw engaging in free trade abroad and exportation to foreign countries significantly contribute to the growth of their economy. As Sweden is only a smaller country, globalization was required in order for the Swedish economy to prosper and to remain as a competitor in the growing international market. The second benefit of globalization was new technology in Sweden. New technology development in Sweden granted their country with the ability to outsource and improve efficiency in their operations. Technology has allowed for the scope of Sweden's trade to be widened not only in regards to physical products, but also to electronic products, which further expands Sweden's operations within the international market. The third area relates to the globalization of higher education in Sweden. Sweden is a strong advocate for collaboration of international academics, where they recognise and appreciate that the world is like one shared culture, and when academics meet, there is no difference between the ones that come from other countries and those who are Swedish. Sweden has overcome cultural differences in which they believe that diversity provides significant strengths that individuals alone cannot, where they choose to appreciate cultural differences. Another area of globalization is the cultural diversity in Sweden. The Swedish government positively welcomes cultural diversity into their country. The policy directive described their diversity situation in 2006 as, Sweden has developed into a country that is characterized by cultural, linguistic, and religious diversity. It is important to highlight that every publicly financed culture institution and culture-enhancing organisation takes the responsibility in their activities to all of the citizens in the country. The starting point is that all citizens' experiences, knowledge, and values should be reflected and taken into account in order to enrich and develop the publicly supported cultural life. This inclusive strategy recognises each and everyone's ability to be included in and connect with Sweden's wider society. Cultural diversity is not only instilled in the older generations, but it is a compelling area in Sweden's education system. Cultural values and inclusive behaviour are being developed and implanted into the new generations, where research on Swedish students' attitudes toward cultural diversity has demonstrated to be of value. Their understanding of the importance of diminishing racism is also very advanced. Some of the challenges that Sweden faces is that with globalization comes significantly increased competition as well as external pressures for change. Competitors are now worldwide and are no longer defined within Sweden's borders. Due to Sweden's smaller size, they face the challenge of their ability to remain as a significant competitor within the developing global market. This not only affects competition directly, but also factors such as employment and production in Sweden. The uncertainty of technology also poses implications for Sweden in terms of globalization. The reliability and validity of information sourced by technology can be questioned and as a result cause challenges for Sweden and its future global development. Increased reliance on technology and digitization for communication, transport, and production can challenge Sweden on the future of their unemployment levels. Technology advancements also incur significant costs involved in adapting to and introducing new technologies within Sweden's operations. In conclusion, it can be seen that Sweden is an overall winner as a result of globalization. This can be seen through their transformed labour market conditions and increasing international open trade. This has seen an overall increase in Sweden's export activity. Sweden has seen an increase in their foreign direct investment, where they are involved with a significant number of multinationals, especially when Sweden's size is considered. Sweden is very open to global economic activity and foreign investment, where their economy is very much so integrated with other economies. And finally, globalization has resulted in an increase in cultural diversity, seeing an increase in foreigners, including students and workers, having immigrated to Sweden.
Sweden is a country with many natural endowments, having access to minerals, water, land, and forests. Minerals form a large part of Sweden's natural resources. They include copper, gold, iron ore, silver, uranium, zinc, and tungsten. Most of these minerals are from the Norrbotten and Skellefteå districts. Mining of metal ores contributes largely to Sweden's GDP, as the country is among the largest iron and steel producers worldwide. Mining of these minerals in Sweden is able to promote their economic growth by creating jobs and providing raw materials to manufacturing. Sweden is not a big country in size, but they do make the most out of their land and forests in terms of farming. Sweden's growing season is relatively short because they are located within the Arctic Circle. However, having up to approximately 45,000 square kilometres of fertile land, people are still able to engage in farming crops, mostly down in southern Sweden. Crops grown in Sweden include wheat, potatoes, barley, oilseeds, sugar beets, and staple vegetables. Farmers also engage in animal agriculture, mainly rearing dairy, cows, poultry, and pigs. Dairy farming contributes to 20% of the Swedish agricultural industry. Dairy farmers produce 2.8 billion kilograms of milk every year. The farmers restrict the use of GMO products, provide 6 hours of grazing during summer, and engage the cows in green walking. Sweden's farming sector employs over 177,500 people, which means up to 1.5% of its workforce having contribution to the economy to the best of their ability due to the size of the country. Sweden has a market economy and is one of the most advanced nations in the world, being ranked as third most innovative country in the world behind Switzerland and Netherlands according to the 2018 Global Innovation Index. They have the privilege of a social safety net to fall back onto if an idea fails to pursue, therefore offering freedom to entrepreneurs of Sweden to experiment and take risks. This social safety net is a system Sweden acquired in order to make it more difficult for monopolies to dominate the market, which encourages new firms to enter the market, hence more diversification in Sweden's market, stimulating innovation in the country. Sweden has a large advantage over many other countries throughout the world in the telecommunication and motor vehicle sectors due to much of their innovative technology they have created. The reason they have such advanced technology is due to the fact that when it comes to research and development, Sweden proves its commitment by investing, as a rule, more than 3% of the country's gross domestic product in research and development. This is much more than many other countries in the world, as shown in the chart above. Hence why Sweden are great at advancing their country and why they are way ahead of almost every country at how innovative they are. Education is one of the fundamental factors of both personal and economic development. No country can achieve sustainable economic development without investment in education. Education raises people's productivity and creativity and is able to promote entrepreneurship and technological advances for a country. Sweden's education system is ranked as the 24th best throughout the world. In the Swedish education system, children at 6 years old begin attending preschool, then following that is 9 years of secondary schooling, which is compulsory and publicly funded, where students must choose between an academic track or a vocational track. As said before, the cost for education is financed by the state, except for the school premises, which is paid for by the local government. Adults also have the opportunity to attend schooling in Sweden to attain skills that they might be lacking that are comparable to those provided by the 9 years of compulsory schooling and 3 years of upper secondary education. The purpose of this is to provide education and training that meet the labour market demand for specific knowledge in different sectors for all ages. Also, Sweden provides theoretical learning which is integrated with vocational practice and training in the workplace. These are called AVEC courses and they cover a wide range of vocational areas. Most AVEC programs span 2 years, but some last 1 year and others 3 years. The Swedish National Agency for Higher Vocational Education is responsible for all publicly funded post-secondary vocational courses throughout the country. Today, about 1/3 of the population in Sweden has post-secondary education. Sweden has one of the world's most modern transportation network, which is regarded as a vital component of economic growth. They possess railroads with just under 13,000 kilometres of track, where 1/3 of them are privately owned. Sweden also has a rapid railroad link that connects Stockholm's main airport with the city centre, plus a 16-kilometre bridge and a tunnel going across from Malmö in Sweden to Denmark's capital city. There are over 160,000 kilometres of paved highways, which also include 1.5 kilometres of expressways. Sweden also holds 2,000 kilometres of waterways in which transportation can take place too. Currently, Sweden is making the largest investment in railroads of modern times in order for the country to be strong and sustainable. Their goal is to have a modern railroad network with trains that run on time throughout the country. This is in order to achieve a transition to a fossil-free state with improved housing and business conditions. Sweden is also constantly maintaining their roads, as having a functioning road transport system throughout the country is believed to promote economic growth and increase the living conditions of the country, which is seen as a very important issue for the Swedish government. In turn, this also strengthens the business sector as it secures jobs and increases Sweden's competitiveness.
Moving on from analysing the level of economic development, we will now analyse the level of human development in Sweden. Human development can be measured by using the Human Development Index, HDI. Human development can be defined as the process of having the ability to have freedom, good well-being, and living conditions. Human Development Report, the HDR, published the Human Development Index in 1990. Defined by the United Nations Development Programme, the Human Development Index is a measure of achievements in specific areas of human development. Initially, the HDI was created to realistically measure national development amongst countries rather than using the gross domestic product to measure human development. The HDI is calculated using 3 dimensions: the gross national income, life expectancy at birth, and the average years of schooling and expected years of schooling. We will now discuss Sweden's Human Development Index ranking. Sweden has a ranking of 7 out of 189 countries and territories in the Human Development Index. Sweden's Human Development Index is similar to that of Australia's. Both countries are listed in the top 10. Australia's ranked 3rd and Sweden's 7th. Over time, the scores in each category have continued to increase. Between 1990 and 2017, the birth expectancy rates increased by 5 years. Average schooling years increased by 1.9 and expected years increased by 4.7 according to the UNDP. Lastly, gross national income increased by 57.9% from 1990 to 2017. Now, we will continue to discuss the human development in Sweden, focusing on education. When it comes to education, there are implications for international business with Sweden. Education is imperative for anticipating another nation's competitive advantage. Education levels can be useful in determining the products the country may sell. The top export that Sweden has is machinery, including electronics, 16.4% of overall exports. Sweden is home to many companies which are based on information technology, such as Spotify, Skype, and Ericsson. These can be linked with higher education in Sweden. Technology and engineering are the second largest group of applicants for higher education studies. Education levels are said to be useful for anticipating a nation's competitive advantage. As Sweden has a large number of graduates studying engineering or technology, it can be seen that Sweden holds a competitive advantage in information infrastructure and technology. Overall, we have decided that the economic development plays a greater significance to an Australian firm wanting to establish a presence in Sweden due to human development being similar to that of Australia. Economic development, as spoken about before, can inform the firm if there is an ability to succeed with Sweden's natural endowments, innovation, and infrastructure capabilities.
So we were asked, using the relevant theories and frameworks, assess the cultural distance between Sweden and Australia. Are the cultures of the two countries becoming more similar, or are they becoming more disparate? For the first part, we use Hofstede's cultural dimensions to assess the cultural differences and similarities between Sweden and Australia. We plotted the graph to compare the results of the two countries. We found that Sweden and Australia scored fairly similarly on most of the dimensions, them being power distance, individualism, and indulgence. Their low score in power distance implies that both countries practice a more decentralized style of management, as power is distributed more equally. Sweden is known to be a highly individualistic country based on our findings, similar to Australia's. The most noticeable difference, however, is in the masculinity dimension, a high score representing a preference for heroism and assertiveness, a more masculine culture, while a low score representing the preference for cooperation, i.e. a more feminine culture. The results show that Australia is said to have a fairly masculine culture, in contrast with Sweden's more feminine culture. Sweden's preference for cooperation can be tied to their concept of lagom, a Swedish word meaning just enough. This concept traces back to the days of the Vikings, where in a circle, men would share one mug and no one would take more than their share, ensuring that everyone has an equal amount, showing their preference for cooperation. In regards to uncertainty avoidance, the results show that Sweden has a more relaxed attitude when it comes to the ambiguity of the future. They do not see innovation as threatening and may in fact welcome it, while Australia scored a more neutral 51, not showing much of a problem in their future. With long-term orientation, Australia scored a low 21, showing it is a normative society where it is more focused on the short-term goals rather than the long-term. Sweden's intermediate 53 may not propose a threat to the cultural difference between the two. And finally, their high score in indulgence can reflect their consumer market, as they're more willing and able to spend money in both of those countries. We then used Roran and Shenkar's cultural clusters to compare the cultures between Sweden and Australia. We found that Sweden fell into the Nordic cluster, while Australia fell into the Anglo cluster. Both clusters are known to score highly on individualism and low on power distance, as proven by Hofstede, their similarity. However, their difference is once again the Anglo focus on assertiveness, while the Nordic focus on cooperation. There is also the language difference, as the Anglo clusters are based on their English background, while the Nordic clusters are based on their Nordic languages, in this case Swedish. While this could propose a language barrier, a majority of the younger Swedish population does often speak English, as it is compulsory in their 4th year of school, therefore eliminating said barrier. In regards to culture, we can conclude that even though these countries are not the same, they are more culturally similar than disparate, because of their similar score in 50% of the cultural dimensions, power distance, individualism, and indulgence, and the intermediary scores not showing much of a preference for either end. Their cultural clusters also do not seem very contrasting to one another, therefore not proposing much of a difference in culture.
They Ricardo argued that it is more efficient for countries to produce goods that they are most efficient at producing, or in other words, it is more efficient for countries to produce goods for which they have a lower opportunity cost and then import other goods from countries for which the opportunity costs are too high. To completely understand Ricardo's concept of comparative advantage, it's important to understand the concept of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the potential benefits of the best non-chosen option. For example, if an individual chooses to sleep for 8 hours instead of studying, the individual's opportunity cost is 8 hours of study which they gave up for sleep instead.
David Ricardo, in an experiment, compared the production of wine and cotton in England and Portugal. In the experiment, David Ricardo argued that if England was to produce only cotton within its own country, it may require the power of 100 men working for 1 year. In order for England to produce the wine and cotton in the same period would require 120 men. Whereas in comparison, Portugal would only require 80 men working for 1 year to produce the wine, and 90 working men to produce both wine and cotton in the same period. Ricardo believed for that reason that England would be better off at producing just cotton, and Portugal would be better off producing just wine, and for the two countries to exchange these two goods between them in free trade. Considering David Ricardo's findings, Sweden should look to specialise in industries in which they have a comparative advantage. Some of these industries include motor vehicles, telecommunication and pharmaceutical industries. According to the Swedish Trade and Investment Council, Sweden has a highly skilled labour force, an abundance of green energy and reliable electric energy. In northern Sweden, there is a company called Northvolt, which has constructed a gigafactory for the production of lithium-ion batteries and has ambitions to produce the most reliable and green battery in the world. Furthermore, according to The Economist, Sweden has a competitive edge over most other countries in terms of information infrastructure and has also been nominated as the most dominant economy for research and development as well as high technology by a recent study commissioned by the European Union. Over 140,000 people are directly employed by the Swedish automotive industry, which is quite significant when considering that they only have a population of approximately 10 million people. Sweden is ranked number 1 for renewable energy in Europe and has 10% of the worldwide market share for the automation industries. For these reasons, it can be said that Sweden has a comparative advantage in the automotive industry, especially in the production of electric and green vehicles, due to the country's spending in research and development as well as their history in the automotive industry. Therefore, Sweden should continue to invest in and specialise in the automotive industry, as they have already invested a lot of resources in this industry, and they would increase their opportunity costs if they decided to redirect their resources into another industry in which they are less efficient at. It is more beneficial for Sweden to utilise their comparative advantage and use the funds generated from this industry and others for which they have a comparative advantage to trade for goods or services in which they lack the comparative advantage. Considering David Ricardo's arguments of comparative advantage, Australia should specialise in those industries in which its opportunity costs are minimised. For Australia, these industries include the education, agriculture and the mining industries. Recent figures from the Australian Bureau of Statistics suggest that international education is valued at $19.9 billion, making it Australia's third largest export. Australia is ranked as the third largest exporter of international education after the United States of America and the United Kingdom. Furthermore, the Australian Bureau of Statistics estimates that 130,000 people are employed by the education sector. Because of these reasons, Australia has a comparative advantage in the particular sector, as Australia has already heavily invested and thrived in this sector. Therefore, it would be unwise for Australia to redirect its resources into another industry, as it would be costly and it would increase Australia's opportunity cost. Therefore, it is wiser for Australia to utilise its comparative advantage and use funds generated from this industry to trade with other countries for goods and services in which Australia does not have a comparative advantage in. Overall, as a group, we have concluded that Sweden is a winner of globalisation, for a few reasons. However, the main one being an increase in exports and trade. When considering an Australian firm who is trying to establish a presence in Sweden, we believe that the economic development of Sweden may be of great importance, as Sweden's human development is quite similar to that of Australia. In terms of culture between Sweden and Australia, they are not the same cultures, however, they are quite similar, given there is a similar score in 50% of the cultural dimensions. Lastly, based on David Ricardo's findings, we believe that it is more beneficial for countries to focus in industries in which they have a comparative advantage. For Sweden, this could be the automotive industry, and for Australia, that could be the education industry. Thank you for watching.
Sweden, 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 Sweden. Us man are down in the DM. Sweden, 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 Sweden. Us man are down in the DM. Sweden, 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 Sweden. Us man are down in the DM. Sweden, 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 Sweden. Us man are down in the DM.